Live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. And our Microsoft, I figured it's close enough to Friday. I think we can just call it a week. So with us tonight, as often, Mala Mahadevan. How you doing, Mala?
Hello, good evening, everyone.
And as occasionally, Mike Christensen. How's it going, Mike? And Rajesh says, happy Monday. Happy Monday to you as well. So, this week is MVP Summit. And as a result, I'm going to keep my mouth extra shut for this week because the NDA mob is out there. And for good reason. You don't want to spill the beans on stuff that's under development. So instead of saying something that will probably end up getting me in trouble accidentally, we have some questions. Gonna be some chat interaction time. By the way, speaking of questions, if you do have questions, that is kind of the purpose of Shop Talk. It's not just to watch me rant and get angry about something silly. If you do have questions, drop them in chat, and we're happy to take a stab at what we can. In the meantime, over on a Slack, Enhance is here for the rants. I mean, I'm here to deliver the rants. I take great joy in having an outlet for my ranting. My wife also takes great joy in that the outlet is not her. So, got that going for us. It's a great relationship there. I have somewhere else to rant, and she's happy for that. So, these come from a former coworker of Mala and mine, and a good friend who is now working for Big Blue, but not IBM Big Blue, the other Big Blue. How do you guys delete old backup files, or what is your preferred way of deleting old backup files? You have thoughts on that, Mala?
Old backup files. Interesting, because I had to delete a bunch of them from one of the businesses we own rather at work after some time. I would say it depends on the data. There are situations where you may need to keep them for a seriously long time. There are other situations where people are just scared that the data is, something, they may need something. So I'm not sure there is a direct answer for that. I think it just depends.
Yeah, all right. So Enhanced QC says, depends on your compliance, talk to your CISO. Yeah, for sure. So let's say we have all that policy stuff figured out, and now there are some backups that are hanging around, and policy says go ahead and delete it. Anders says, I do it as part of my backup procedure. And yeah, that's a good way of doing it. So you back up database to disk, and that's going to write someplace, or you back it up to a URL or something. There are a couple of steps that you can follow. One of them is that you could have, like Anders does, as part of the backup procedure, a step, and probably using something like XP command shell to go out, delete files that are older than X days or X months old. If that data is in MSDB, you've got the backup set table and the backup media files tables. You can find those older database backups and delete them that way. The data in MSDB, though, is not necessary. So what I mean by that is you can have a backup that exists in a file someplace on a disk somewhere that MSDB doesn't know about. And also, like Anders says, for backups for a database that do not exist any longer, those won't show up in MSDB. So it may not necessarily be relevant or sufficient for doing backup deletion. Unfortunately, XP command shell is disabled, and when I enabled it, I got a call from InfoSec Oh.
Yeah, no surprises there.
So Sean McCown has some legendary rants on how XP command shell is not a problem. Uh,
Correct.
we'll we'll walk past that because I agree. I fully agree with Sean on that. Um, and say, okay, well, if XP command shell is disabled, a PowerShell job is probably going to be your best bet. And Anders actually responded exactly that way. So PowerShell job is going to be your best bet at that point. You'll go into your backup directory, get the items that are greater than X days or months or whatever time frame old, and pipe those to delete object. So you can do it essentially as a one-liner.
Fair enough.
Put that
That's
as
what
a
we do at work.
yeah.
Was that with DBA tools or DBA checks, or is that just with regular PowerShell?
So could you use
It's simple
DBA tool?
PowerShell.
This would be with regular PowerShell. I'm sure that there is a DBA tools commandlet that will help with it. I'm positive that there is. But yeah, this is the type of thing you can do in one line in PowerShell.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be the best route that you've got. Have that as, if you have a SQL agent job to do backups, have one extra step at the end, delete old backups, where you use PowerShell in your backup directory, do a get child item based off of date or based off of whatever rules you have that are necessary, and pipe that to delete object. Do a lot of testing as well just to make sure, but you don't want to accidentally pipe delete object like for everything. I would probably focus on star.back files so that you don't accidentally delete a bunch of other stuff that you didn't intend to.
So I am paranoid about this. I tend to get it in writing from whoever the business owner is that they will not have access to that data any longer. It's gone for good. So it's not enough if they tell you okay on chat or something like that. Get it in writing that they don't want it. Okay, I have something to go by now.
Yeah. And Rajesh says,
Yeah.
yes, I'm playing with that right now, piping and removing only files with .trn and .back. Yeah. If you look at maintenance plans, the way that maintenance plans work, they actually do have delete steps where they'll say, here's your extension for backups.
Right.
Don't use maintenance plans.
Didn't know anybody still use them.
Oh, there are people who still use them.
Interesting.
Because they're easy to put in place. So
Yeah.
You've got a lot of places that just have them set and may or may not be working correctly.
Correct.
Okay,
great. Is he talking of maintenance plans?
Yes, but Anders, I think, is here for the hot takes. I think he's here to deliver the hot takes.
And is calling an SSIS package great is something.
And then if you're doing non-enterprise development stuff, you can use like Docker containers and just wipe them out.
That's true. So for the example Ola has, avoid delete, but with how we changed the backup location, it is hard with the old scripts. Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you're moving backups, so you back up to the D drive, and then you move them right after that to a long-term storage location, then your MSDB info will still point to that D drive. So yeah, you'll have to know where those files are in order to delete them.
Interesting.
So Solomon points out. Oh, go ahead, Mala.
Yeah. 2 undocumented items.
Yep. Solomon points out xp_delete_files, the function, as a replacement for xp delete file. So that's in SQL Server 2019, although it is undocumented, and you have to use 2019. But xp delete file might be available. I mean, my route would probably be use PowerShell for this. That it needs command shell, so that makes sense. Yeah, I think using PowerShell is probably going to be your easiest route. Okay, I think the new one is a stored procedure rather than a function. That could be. I have not used that function slash procedure slash object, so not sure. But yeah, it sounds like PowerShell is probably you're going to be your best friend for this one. Just write a VB function. Yeah, PowerShell is going to be your best friend for this one. If you're going to write VB, then we're going to talk F#. How are other DBAs handling it? Generally, if you don't have access to XP Command Shell and you're not using something like Minion Backup or Ola Hallengren solution, and you're able to do the backup from there, PowerShell is your best choice. If you're using Minion Backup, for example, that one does use XP Command Shell to perform deletes. And I think Ola's solution also uses XP Command Shell for it. Depending on the SAN, you could set retention. Yeah, that's a third option. If you're writing to a SAN or to S3 or Azure Blob Storage, you could set retention on the folder itself if you have a smart enough SAN or you're writing out to Blob Storage or S3 buckets.
Back in the days, we used to use DOS batch files. Schedule them on the server to run them every now and then.
Yep.
That was a long time. Yeah.
Get those .bat files in there. Andrew says we do this, the auto delete of older files in a blob storage container for a 20 terabyte database. I mean, I do it for other stuff as well, where you can set that retention policy and say anything older than 90 days, go ahead and delete. Or anything after 2 years, go ahead and delete. Better make sure you know how to quarantine if you need it longer. That is a good point. Once you set that policy, I mean, the same thing applies with the PowerShell files. If you do it with a PowerShell script to delete, or you use Minion Backup, or use whatever tool you're using, if you need to retain that backup for a while, have a process. That process doesn't have to be explicitly baked into whatever script you write, but you should have a method where you say, I need this backup for longer because whatever reason, legal called and said, we're getting sued, you better hold on to that data. Or the customer had some sort of issue and you have to make sure that that backup is still available.
Right. That's why you have to make sure anybody on the business side knows what you're doing and agree to it.
That's true. Yeah. Enhanced QC says Azure has retention labels you can apply to different data. I know this works for OneDrive or SharePoint. Does it work for blob storage as well? I don't know how comprehensive scoping and labeling can get. That's a really good question. So good that I don't know the answer to it. I know, so I recall with S3, it's a fairly simple function that it's basically set retention on a folder or a S3 bucket. I don't remember what blob storage and data lake store have as functionality. So I'm not sure if you can apply a different label and say delete based on this label after a certain time. So I'll leave it as a definite maybe. Sensitivity and retention labels, says Enhanced QC, are amazing for DFARS or any type of compliance. Never had to try to apply labels to anything outside of OD or SP, though. They are, so yeah, they're really useful for exactly what you're talking about, the sensitivity and retention values, that this is confidential information. This is really, really confidential information. Do not let this thing outside of this bucket. Or do not let anybody download this SharePoint file. They can view it, but they can't download it. I mean, you still have risks of data exfiltration, but at that point it is no longer accidental. Like if I'm taking photos from my phone of the screen where I'm getting collections of data, clearly I'm not doing this on accident. I like it when companies label data as sensitive. I love it when they send emails. This is confidential information. Our employee luncheon will be on Thursday at this location. Like, does that really need to be confidential?
I think that's just they cut and paste from my older emails, to save the pain of formatting and making a whole new one.
Yeah, or they just have everything, like, it's part of the subject. Just slap confidential on everything.
Yeah.
And it is just laziness. I agree, Anders. It's like, this is not confidential information. And actually, I really love the confidential information. Share this on Twitter. You see that every once in a while. Like, our marketing team has a new thing that they're announcing, and we want you to share that far and wide. But the subject says it's confidential. I see. This is a honeypot, isn't it? I'm not falling for this one. Although, admittedly, if confidential wasn't slapped on the subject, I probably still wouldn't share it because, yeah. All right. So hopefully that answered your question well enough, Rajesh. I think we gave you options. Some of them may even be good options. That's kind of the way we roll. Think of it as a choose your own adventure, and sometimes you get the bar, sometimes the bar gets you.
Fair.
Put confidential on everything so you don't regret not having it. That seems to be corporate policies at a lot of places. All right. Welcome back, Mike. Speaking of getting the bar, Mike had to wrestle a bear, and that's why he was off camera for a little bit. There's only one answer. It depends. That's if you're a consultant. That's if you get charged by the hour because you can filibuster for 45 minutes, and 45 minutes is essentially an hour, so you can bill for the full hour.
That is correct.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
Speaking of filibustering, so these come from Brian. That's an attorney's answer. Well, the attorney's answer is, I talked to you for 1 minute, therefore I can bill you for 6 minutes. And I talked to some other guy for 1 minute, and therefore I can bill him for 6 minutes. And I talked to this person for 1 minute, and therefore I can bill her for 6 minutes. And therefore, that's how I got 36 minutes over the course of a 6-minute conversation.
Is alias 6 as a 1 or 1 as a 6?
That you get far enough along, and you get some. That's how I broke our timesheet system. Yeah, exactly. You get some really wacky things when you're talking like high-level corporate lawyer, where I can answer this question in 25 seconds. Now I have to bill you 6 minutes. Minimum of 4 hours per client, had 7 in one day. That's how you roll. I've broke time systems other ways, where it'll be like, so I worked until 3 a.m. What day should that be on? And that was fun. That was, I mean, not as much fun as it sounds like in retrospect, but breaking the timesheet, definitely enjoyable. Like, I worked starting on Saturday, and the new week starts on Sunday. Do I legally get overtime? Because I broke 40 hours on Saturday, except I started at 10 p.m. and it rolled over into 3 a.m. on Sunday. My state agency did not have a good answer for that because they didn't imagine people working on weekends. So that was cool. So Rednello asks, I have a question about storing Word documents in a document database as var binary max. I'm limiting my users to an upload size of 3 megabytes. I'm storing them this way so that I can encrypt them and back them up. Do you see any problems with this practice?
SQL is not very good with storing this kind of data.
Yeah, I would
SQL
agree with that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's why you have stuff like document DB and various things. They are meant for that purpose.
yeah, Cosmos wouldn't be so great for like storing Word docs, but there is actually a function in SQL Server. There's functionality that is designed for this. That is file table. So you can get the metadata from SQL Server. The backups, I'd have to go back to remember how the backup systems work, but basically you're not storing the data in SQL Server itself. You're pointing to a network share where the data lives. And I do get the.
I thought we discussed something about some issues with that, Kevin, in the same some time ago. But go on, please. Not interrupting.
Yeah, in file table, can they be encrypted? Docs are sensitive. The data can be encrypted on disk, so you can still have, say, disk level encryption, which I imagine you're doing something equivalent to like transparent data encryption when storing them in SQL Server. And a couple of options, if encryption at rest is your answer, then you can encrypt the disk subsystem where they live on. If you want encryption elsewhere, like Anders says, you can encrypt them before going to SQL Server. You could do something, it could be as silly as save it in a zip file or gzip or 7-zip with a password, or do proper encryption, running it through, say, a .NET application to take the binary, encode that binary using an encryption algorithm, and store that encrypted data as a file. I mean, what we're all getting at is, yeah, you could also compress them. And compression wouldn't give you that encryption for sensitivity. It would gzip it to reduce size. It may reduce size for a Word doc. DocX format is XML, but it's I forget if gzip really helps on DocX files. It might, but I thought I remembered DocX basically being like a zipped XML, zipped folder of XML data. So it may not actually reduce the size of Word doc. But I think a lot of people here are getting to storing them in a table isn't necessarily a great solution. The reason for that being, so why would it be a bad practice? There are a couple of reasons. One of them is, like people are pointing out, you can't really work with the data in SQL Server. So there's not much benefit to having it in SQL Server itself. It sounds like
Correct.
It's mostly about, I'm going to accept data, store it, return it without doing any sort of analysis or processing. You're obviously not using it within SQL Server unless you have some crazy CLR, in which case we can talk about it a little more. But also storing it in those databases on SQL Server means that it's stored on some pretty expensive disk, on some pretty expensive compute, and there's the risk of growth. If we're talking, I've got 500 files and it's, I don't know what, 100 kilobytes per file, and so we're talking 50 megabytes or so. That's not really a concern. But like Anders is pointing out, if it grows and you suddenly have 5 terabytes of binary data, there's a lot that you can't really work with, and you're not going to be able to get that space back. All of your backups become that much larger. All of your operations you're working off of become that much slower because you've got all of this like, blob data stored in tables. And so generally, that's why the recommendation is take that blob stuff and put it onto a network share with pointers to where those files are. Because now in SQL Server, all you have is essentially a file name and maybe a location for it. And that's text data.
But
It's
wouldn't
very
that be a
easily on a
problem
page.
if he moves it somewhere, Kevin?
Sorry, go ahead. What was that, Mala?
Wouldn't that be a problem if something changes on the share, like you have to move the file or something happens?
Yep. So you might want to. I mean, that's actually one of the benefits of file table, where if you move them around, that pointer to where the files are does update as long as you stay within the share. But if you move, you could store that share location in a different table, in a control table or something. But yeah, it will technically work fine. And if you're talking small data sets, it's you can do worse. But generally, the risk is you think it's going to be small, and then it turns huge, and there can be massive performance implications. You can't really performance tune that sort of operation when all of that data is on lob, and you have these ops that are taking so long. When your backup takes forever, when running CheckDB takes forever, when doing any of the administrative options take a long time. Isn't file table tied to SQL Server such that you can't simply delete the files externally? My recollection was that you could, but I will admit it's been a few years since I've used file table.
I've used it once a long time ago. That's why I posed the question, is that it's not tied to SQL or anything. It's just a pointer to where that thing resides. And if you move it around or do something with it, then that pointer is just wrong, invalidate.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's been a while since I touched it, though. If they fix that, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Right. It's it's a thing where I would say, check it out as a possibility, and for handling encryption, probably disk level encryption is going to help out there. If that's not good enough, transparent data encryption is disk level encryption. That's basically what it comes down to. So, if something needs to be better, you could take the files and zip them up with a password, or run them through an encryption algorithm and decrypt them. Enhanced QC mentioned salting sensitive PII elements. It's an option. That's another option as well. So Anders was saying that he thinks only the internal SQL account can get to data that's in file table. If you're admin enough, that doesn't matter. So, question: transparent data encryption doesn't keep the KEK. Sorry, I'm always going to call it KEK. Out of scope, though, right? The key is still stored on the same platform. Yes, and this is where you get to turtles. It's turtles all the way down. And let me see if I can find the blog post that I just referenced there. Because it is a great Oh, I want TDE and turtles. This isn't working so well. So, I'll try to find that post. But essentially, yeah, turtles all the way down. That's what the reference is about, and it was a great blog post from a guy who, or it was an article from a guy who didn't really do much blogging, and basically the point was that you have this whole slew of yeah, Simon McAuliffe. Here it is. So you have this whole set of steps that happen for the encryption mechanism in with transparent data encryption, but all of it happens on the same machine. So all of the keys are on the same machine in the same place. If you have sufficient access to the server, you can decrypt it yourself using those keys that are stored on the machine itself. And let me see if his blog is gonna load, but here is the URL. Maybe other people will have more luck opening it up than I will. But that was an article from Simon McAuliffe. So I would hope the keys are stored in a TPM module. The initial specs for TDE were from before trusted platform, like the whole trusted platform computing concept, because that's going back to 2005. So there may have been advancements since then. There probably have been advancements since then, but yeah, TDE is not great for security. Always encrypted, however, you do have always encrypted secure enclaves. You do have the use of trusted platform modules. You do have other capacity, like you can use a hardware module instead of the software module. So that is a better option for I need serious encryption. TDE to me was always I need checkbox encryption. I need to be able to tell people we encrypt our data. Yep, we encrypted at rest. Yeah, hardware security module equals money. Absolutely. And also, you go back to 2005, between the costs of that encryption in terms of money as well as performance, the trade-off was, well, we don't necessarily have the compute capacity to encrypt everything everywhere the best way. So here is the compromise that we will make. We'll encrypt it at rest on disk, and it can be not encrypted in memory while it's being processed. I mean, also remember that it wasn't until just about 2 or 3 years ago that SSL everywhere was being pushed as a standard. So, that whole idea of everything should be running with TLS, you still have websites that aren't really using TLS. So, there were compute compromises. And transparent data encryption felt to me like they needed to check a box for HIPAA. HIPAA was starting to get somewhere, and they were starting to put teeth on that act. Yeah, like for the first decade or so of HIPAA, there wasn't really much in the way of what happens if you violate it. Now you violate HIPAA, there are some real teeth. I mean, you're talking $50,000 to $100,000 per incident.
Oh, you can land in jail.
Yep.
You can land in jail. Yeah, I mean the business owner, whoever that is. Yeah.
Right. So that it's gotten a lot more serious since then, but at the time, it was always one of those things of, you don't want to violate HIPAA, but it wasn't land yourself in jail serious. 1 million max fine. Yep. There are jail time stories. So the max fine was for a number of incidents. I think it was something like $50,000 to $100,000 per incident. So if you released the info of 10 people, that was 10 separate incidents.
You just need extra interns to blame it on.
I love that.
I have a story about that, but
isn't that? I mean, this is public knowledge, right? This is partially what Solar Winds did, right?
There was blame it on the intern, yes.
Yeah.
It's always blame it on the intern. But yeah, that was part of it. That intern had some credentials that were in plain text, and I think got checked into a repo somewhere. I believe that was part of the story.
And so on your point for the website, Simon McCall's website seems to not be working, but he does have a presentation on YouTube called Breaking Microsoft SQL Server Transparent Data Encryption.
Cool.
So he effectively broke it.
Yeah. It's if you understand how all of the key mechanisms work, it's essentially go find this registry key. Inside this registry key is this type of key, and you use that with this piece of information, and you get the next layer. And it's all just like there's a bunch of database encryption keys, other types of internal keys, and so much of it ends up being just find this registry entry, and that's the piece of information you need to decrypt data. Securing just means getting hackers to go somewhere is easier and cheaper to get data. Right, it's part of any sort of defense. You think about home defense. There are, I would say there's two levels of that. Level one is the master lock. You can open a master lock with a Coke can, but the fact that you put the master lock on something, despite it being trivial to open, will deter enough people who will just say, "Oh, I didn't realize there's a lock on it, so I guess I shouldn't go here," and it will get them to say, "Okay, well let's not go here." Like you have a gate with a lock on it, even if that lock is trivial to defeat. Just having the lock there says, "Okay, I shouldn't be doing this, so I won't."
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Or people who want to get in, they will get through that master lock easily. So you have the other side of defense, which is, like Andrews is saying, you make it annoying or difficult enough for them so that they go on to someplace else.
Uh-huh.
Or you make it obvious enough that you are not an easy target, and they'll go find an easy target. Like, yeah, I can spend 2 hours trying to get through your set of home security defenses, or I can go open this car door that somebody left unlocked and take the stuff out of the car. Like stores put fake CCD cameras up, or they have real CCD cameras that just haven't been recording anything for years. Because they bought them 15, 20 years ago, and they ran out of cassette tapes to record them on.
Yeah, and I just working in the healthcare industry, we have a lot of defenses, and I know banking has a lot of defenses, and I think you've seen local governments get hit hard, right, in the news because they don't have the same kind of resources sometimes as, say, Duke Health does, or government, like defense or a big bank.
Yep. And also on the fake cameras, you can look up at a bunch of stores and you'll see the little black bulbs that are supposed to hide cameras. They're bulbish protrusions from the ceiling, and that's supposed to be where a camera is. And I would guess that probably about 90% of them are just plastic undercovers with nothing inside them.
Yeah.
Quick sidebar on that, because I did go to an AI conference on Durham would be one of the situations where Target is one of 100 test stores where you'd be amazed. So they have been doing this new program where they can make a 3D image of you that's ghosted, and they can analyze your facial expressions if you're laughing, if you're squatting down to look at a product. It was shocking to me the level of data that they have on people in the stores where all those cameras are working, and they're
Right.
also picking up your cell phone signals, and
Now
yeah.
cell phones are a different thing. So Andrew says those are Wi-Fi. Sometimes they're Wi-Fi, but those things have been in there since before any of those stores had Wi-Fi in them. So as far as cell phone stuff, there are companies that do Bluetooth beacons, and one company that I know of, about a third of people have applications installed from this company. And it's one of those companies that you probably would never have heard of, but they're in the business of GPS enhancement. So like if you're at a sporting event, they'll have these beacons everywhere where you can pop up the app, or you're at a home improvement store, whether the big blue one or the big orange one. Pay me if you want me to sponsor your product on Shop Talk. But whichever one you're at, you can walk into the store and it'll say, "Oh, you're in aisle 4, and here are the things in aisle 4." That isn't GPS. GPS isn't specific enough. Civilian GPS isn't precise enough that it could tell you what aisle you're in. They can tell you that you're in the store, but it's Bluetooth beacons from various companies that are located throughout the store that give you the idea of, here's where I am because my phone is communicating with this beacon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Anders says, at least that's what my boss said of the one right over my computer. Exactly. So Dad uses GPS to plant less than 1-inch precision. GPS is more than 1 inch of precision. It's several meters for civilian grade with ground-based enhancement. Yeah, see, that's the part that I'm talking about, where your ground-based enhancement is going to be some other technology typically. So 4 sats plus 1 ground-based. So yeah, you have some sort of enhancement. In the case I'm talking about, it's Bluetooth, where they're getting that extra precision from the Bluetooth. You can use GPS to say, I'm in this narrow area of within several meters. And then you get the operating beacons to say, okay, here's where you're at exactly. So it sounds like the ground-based enhancement is a similar concept, except that thing right there will tell you right here is exactly these coordinates. The plant crops, oh yeah. Agriculture is huge on IoT and on advanced technologies. When you had some clown talking about how planting, being a farmer, you just dig a hole in the ground and drop some seeds in. No, there's a huge amount of information that that people in agriculture go for. Like those
I like that data architect job with John Deere.
I have a colleague that used to work there. When I worked at Biogen, he had come from John Deere.
Yep. And Enhanced QC. My wife's grandpa hasn't planted anything in 10 years. The tractor's programmed in Illinois by John Deere. Andrew says, my dad has a printer in his combine. Right. These implements are extremely advanced. People who are not in agriculture have no clue just how advanced all of this is. You're talking about if you're interested in IoT, agriculture is a hotbed for IoT. That combine that Anders is talking about, there are literally dozens of IoT devices on that combine itself just to help with planting. If you watch the thing, they have some really cool machine learning solutions where it'll even get you to, based off of your land, based off of the plot of your land, here is exactly how we're going to turn so that we hit each spot exactly once.
Very interesting. Good to know,
That's
Kevin. I
really
had no idea.
Yeah, it's an amazing field, and people have this old impression of farming in the 1800s where you've got horses and plows, and didn't realize that no, this is an extremely high-tech field. It's just those people don't look quite the same as what we consider high-tech people to look like, so clearly they can't be using
So
technology.
true. Yeah, so true. Yeah.
If it detects one area of the field has bad yields, next year it just quits wasting seeds and fertilizer. Yeah, it's crazy. Or handling crop rotations, handling a lot of different things that historically, you've had to guess at or had to have deep internal knowledge about. So that's an area that I love, that I don't really get into much because I don't know enough about agriculture to do much of anything. But Dad uses half the fertilizer and chemicals compared to 1990 with twice the yields. True.
That's a good story for the environment as well. Yeah.
Yep, you get a lot more impact out of the same plot of land, and with information that you technically could have learned that information, but this made it so much easier to learn. Enhanced QC says, yep, wife's grandfather used to send soil samples to the University of Kentucky, wait for results by snail mail, and then make those changes. Now it's all done via computer and local. So in the Triangle area, we've got NC State has a huge agriculture program, and similar things. You would send your soil samples out to them. They'd tell you, here are the types of fertilizers you would need. Here's how, here are the crops. If you want to grow these crops, you'll need to use this concentration of nitrogen, et cetera, et cetera. Andrew says, especially with the Tri-County drinking water is downstream from the farm. That's a big factor. For the new one, they don't need soil samples. It samples the color of the crops to figure out what it needs. I mean, that's just crazy. So you're doing computer vision. You're doing a lot of dedicated machine learning practices, and there has to have been a lot of experience on the back end side of, here are the outcomes. Like, I need to label that data that says, if these tomatoes look like this, here is the problem and here is the solution. So it's a huge amount of human intelligence combined with machine intelligence. It's just, it's a really interesting field. And I think it's one of the best examples of both IoT and machine learning that we've got. Farm equipment is more advanced than the planes he flew. Yeah, since he retired from before some of the most modern planes, I could believe that. Yeah, even a aircraft that like a 777 from the 90s, or up to fly-by-wire Airbus, so probably early 90s for that. You've got 30 years of technology since then.
I mean, on my airplane, I just changed my oil myself.
Right. But yeah, it's an interesting field, and there's a lot of really interesting data that requires some specialized knowledge to get the most out of. And historically, that's been knowledge that you have learned about the local circumstances that you have. But being able to combine that with general information, is really exciting. Then you get into the right to repair problem. That is a whole nother story. Right to repair is a real problem with newer equipment. And I know that there were some states that were actually pushing right to repair laws. There was a push a few years back for federal legislation around right to repair and right to resell. I am fully in favor of that. I'm of the opinion that if you bought the thing, you should own the thing. And if you own the thing, you should be able to fix it. You should be able to work with it. You should be able to do things with it. It's not just a finished product black box that you're not allowed to touch. I get it from the standpoint of it will void your warranty. Okay, if I have a warranty, then I can take that risk into consideration. But if I'm getting this third hand from somebody else, yeah, I should be able to fix the thing. I should be able to work with it. And there are some difficulties in that regard today, where you have like a software agent that will check and say, oh, this server's not available, therefore this hardware that you paid hundreds or thousands of dollars for just won't work. Like, hey, one day your Nest thermostat stops working because Google pulled that project. And I hate that notion. Enhanced QC says, I met a contractor at a place I worked. He was helping to install an auto crane. He told me about a chicken plant with an AI/ML system that graded chickens with OCR. All the birds went through level upon level of grading automatically with cameras and AI.
It's like animal husbandry on steroids, yeah.
Well, you know, like, hey, these chickens need more feed. These chickens are having these problems. So yeah, that it is cool. It's interesting to watch that stuff, and you know, again, being able to separate local knowledge versus global knowledge, where these types of systems are great at providing you global knowledge. The local knowledge is knowledge of the particulars of time and place and the specific circumstances you're in. The general knowledge is here are the conditions of a thing, and under these conditions, typically the best answer is to do this. They should include Tesla also in the right to repair. You can't just take off stuff from your car since you might have violated. Right, and you know, you get into some of the shakier parts of modern technologies. I gave the Nest thermostat example because I think that was a real example. But you have home IoT devices that have terrible security, and then their parent companies just cancel the product, and now this thing that you bought, it wasn't Nest. Okay, I remembered, well, Sonos might have been. I thought Nest actually did get pulled off the market, that Google just killed it, but maybe it was something else. Maybe it was some variant of a Nest thermostat. But yeah, IoT devices that you buy and that you think, I have a thing, and then the thing stops working because they take down the server that was necessary for your thing to work. That is a good point, Mike. You would like to say it out loud, that way I'm not just talking all the time.
Yeah, so for my accounting training, you know, a lot of financial, I wouldn't say tricks, but like in order to not have these big, huge assets on the books, like airplanes are not really purchased or leased. And so I can imagine in a world where you're buying a $2 million tractor, there might be service agreements associated with it, and it could be leased so that it's not liability that you need to have on your books. I'm speculating, but I think that for certain, I agree with you with being able to purchase something and be able to fix it. But I think some of the very expensive items that you really don't own them sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And if it is a proper lease, I agree. That's something where you don't really own the thing. So yeah, you can't necessarily do what you want to it because it's not really yours, it's somebody else's. You're just leasing it from them. With airplane jet engines, you purchase hours on the wing. Yep, I mean, with an airplane, you can buy your own, but then typically what happens is that they rent it out. Like Anders is saying, you purchase hours. So data is sent to, say, GE after every flight, and they call and say, we need to replace that engine in X hours. Oh, that is pretty interesting. Except apparently on Boeing planes.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've flown. I used to like flying on Boeing planes.
Did you have a choice?
I like landing on any
choice of
plane.
that, Kevin? Like you would not fly Boeing, you would fly something else.
Well, different company. Yeah. So I mean, basically, your choices at this point: Boeing and Airbus. McDonnell Douglas, the MD-80. You're not going to find many of those anymore. You can get smaller ones. The Embraer has a few good models. Canada Regional Jet CRJ, they're just too tiny. There's certain airplanes and airlines that Anders will not fly on. Oh, I'm fully with you there. CRJ is gone. Yeah, if you ever try... So, if you've not had the experience of flying on a CRJ before, imagine that you weigh more than 100 pounds. Now, if that is the case, you will have difficulty getting into and out of this plane. Like, the seats are intended for children, it seems like. I kind of joke, but it is a regional shuttle plane. It's the type of plane that you fly from Boston to New York. It seats about 50 to 75 people very uncomfortably. You may or may not be able to put luggage somewhere. Like the overhead boxes are roughly 3/4 the size of a person's roller bag, which makes it hilarious to watch people try to shove roller bags into these things. Well, where will you not fly on? Allegiant. Yeah, that's fair. Spirit, the school bus of the sky. They even mark their planes in yellow to show that. A lot of budget airlines, only airline to be audited by the FAA without having had a deadly accident. Well, that's something. Prop planes. Ooh, so Mike, you don't like turboprops?
Make me a little bit nervous. They're probably safer.
Yeah, they're pretty safe. They're pretty
They
safe.
tell you like, hey, can you move seats because we're trying to redistribute weight, like these smaller.
Oh yeah, that happens. That does happen on the smaller planes, especially on flights that are not heavily booked. We need to redistribute weight so that the plane can take off.
I'm a nervous flyer, but I always watch the flight attendants and stuff to see if they're panicking because they've seen it all. So
Yeah.
I know they're panicking.
I'm very nervous too, especially in the past year. There have been all kinds of weird accidents that happen.
Yeah, well, most of them involving Boeing.
That's how my statistics textbook started off on airplane accidents, and I was like, can you pick something else like Vegas like games or like something?
Right. Yep. But yeah, there are some airlines that I'm happy flying on. There are some that hard pass. I have changed flights so that I could avoid a particular model of plane, but to be honest, I'll fly in a CRJ because that means I'm flying 25 minutes, and if it saves me 4 hours in an airport, okay. But if I'm planning things out, like if I see 737 Max, nope. I don't care if they claim it's all been fixed. Don't care.
Right. That's fair.
I didn't like the Max before they had all the problems. Delta is most Airbus. American Airlines has a bunch of Airbus as well. And I've never been a huge Airbus fan either. They haven't had the reliability issues that Boeing has had lately, but so they've got that going for them. I tried to get on a MAX for my flight to Dallas. That was a bad idea, Anders.
Well, we're glad he's still around and everything went well.
No, actually, okay. The MAX isn't as bad as I'm making it out, but it's pretty crappy. Like even if you avoid the whole issues around weight distribution, engine location, and software that accidentally tries to kill passengers. Even if you avoid all that stuff, just the fact that the seats are so thin that they're just jamming more and more people into these seats, and they're trying to these are for long haul, well, mid haul flights. I mean, it's okay, 737s are never going to be long haul, but they're pushing those things further and further. So you could do cross country in a MAX, and that's a painful 4.5 hour flight. The MAX is probably the safest plane now, just because they're all on the ground. They won't let them take them off. So anyhow, on that note, I think we're going to call it an evening. Oh, they are flying again. Wow. I'm slightly amazed because I heard that they'd been regrounded 3 or 4 times, that every time they were ready to go again, they found another issue. As of 3 weeks ago. Okay, so that's new information. Good. That means next time I fly, I will go back to avoiding MAXes. Which isn't always easy to do, because sometimes they're marked as 737-800. So, with that,
We have time to think about that, Kevin.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have no flight plans at any time soon.
None of us do.
Nope. I'll be interested to see what the airlines do if they extend status for 1 more year. But I guess we'll see. Anyhow, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for checking in to Shop Talk. And catch you next time, 2 weeks from now.